Let's call this Tuesday, December 11th, school board work session to order. Our mission statement, our mission is to provide an excellent, equitable education in a safe, supported environment so all students will succeed and contribute to a diverse and changing society. Sharon, can you call the roll?
Ms. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Rice is expected. Mrs. Lambert?
Here.
Ms. McConnell?
Here.
Ms. Marati?
Here.
Mr. Doran?
Here.
Mrs. Dominique?
Here.
The board has a quorum.
Okay. I guess first we'll start off with, I'll pass it over to Karen so that she can have Mr. Shedor speak about our first thing. But I wanted to add in the board norms, I have some things that I want to present as well. So I'll start first in the board norms.
You want to start with board norms?
No. Go ahead.
Start. And they might blend. They might get a little blendy.
Okay.
So I'll let John get hooked up here. So we invited John to come to be part of this. Most people have been through some sort of Open Meetings Act training, either very recently or at AASB. John did some of that training at AASB or previously. We've had folks come and do this. So we just wanted, instead of another presentation, especially one after, a lot of people had seen this, was just an opportunity to ask questions. The kind of questions I've sort of been trying to field, maybe just to kick it off, and it will spur other folks, is around emails, and so board members emailing each other and how that needs to go to Sharon, and then also board members meeting. And the one thing that I think that's worth asking and have a conversation around is when 3 board members are meeting, what are the implications of that? And I think we've got to talk about that to be sure you guys are really clear on 3 board members having a meeting, and then what? So I'll turn it over to John with that.
So I brought the presentation. I mean, I don't want to do the presentation, but I might use it if there's particular questions. I mean, that's a 2-hour presentation I do for AASB every year as part of the boot camp. But so I'd really like to just address any particular questions that you have. What the Open Meetings Act does, I just actually wrote an article for AASB that I turned in this morning before I came here. It's called the Open Meetings Act. The Open Meetings Act collided with an earthquake 7.0 in Anchorage, Alaska. So I talk about flexibility in the Open Meetings Act in that article. It'll be put out by AASB in the next week or so. But in general, what the Open Meetings Act is intended to do, so we'll stay at the 30,000 foot view. What it's supposed to do is to provide transparency. It's not it doesn't create a town hall meeting. What it does is, what it does is says people can come to these meetings, including work sessions. Work session is just one type of a public meeting. People can come to these meetings and watch the board deliberate. And so what the Act addresses is 2 things specifically in the Alaska Supreme Court cases. One is, and this is an easy one, you're voting. You can't vote except for being in an open meeting that's properly noticed, with a couple of exceptions for executive session, which we'll actually be doing later. One of those exceptions is giving direction to giving directions in negotiations with regard to your labor negotiators. So that's an exception. But the general rule is people get to watch you vote. The other thing that they get to watch is they get to watch you deliberate. So they get to watch you deliberate. So I'll go to you raised the question about the serial meeting. I'll go to that, and then we'll see if there's any questions or comments or people want to drive the discussion one way or the other. I don't want to make this any longer than you want it to be. I want to make sure I answer any questions that you have. So a common problem in the Open Meetings Act is serial meetings, and that can happen in a virtual world, and that generally would be email or Snapchat or whatever other social media may exist out there. It can also happen actually in the physical world, and that can be where you end up together and you're either deliberating or you're making decisions outside of an open meeting. Let me give you a classic example is an email. Somebody sends an email out to all board members and I actually was dealing with this with the Anchorage board a few weeks ago. That may come up part of our negotiations discussion. But say one board member sends an email to all board members. Is that a violation of the Open Meetings Act? Does anyone want to take a shot? The answer is no, it's not. One board member, what I call that is when I know about as much science as can fit into a thimble. But I remember this, the difference between kinetic energy and potential energy. And when one board member sends an email to all board members, that's potential energy. It has the high potential of becoming a violation of the Open Meetings Act because all somebody has to do is hit reply all and say, think about this, I agree. You've just either announced you deliberated on I agree, meaning I agree with everything you've said, or I agree with you and I'm going to vote that way. You've now committed to a vote. So you've just violated the Open Meetings Act by hitting reply all. That's why a lot of districts put on the bottom of emails that go to all board members, please do not hit reply all. There's other ways to violate the act, though, in an email, right? So reply all is just such an easy way, so there's usually notice of that or you get trained on that. Another way would be for one board member to take that and forward it to, say, two other board members, who then forward it on to a third board member, which now we've now incorporated 4 school board members. So that's one way. That's the email, the virtual world. A physical world example would be for one board member to be, like if I was a board member, I could be the hub, and here's all the spokes. I could talk to 1 board member, 2 board member, 3 board member, and I'm actually driving, I'm getting consensus, I'm deliberating, and I'm doing it systematically to achieve an end. That's a violation of the Open Meetings Act. That's called a serial meeting. Another way of doing that would be, for smaller groups to meet, 2 meet, and then one of those 2 meets with another 2, and one of those 2 meets with another 2. The idea is the rule of thumb is if you're trying to get the board to make a decision and you're systematically working through the board members, that could be called an Open Meetings Act violation. And I do want to make sure I say that it's a potential violation doesn't make it a violation. To make it a violation, technically, somebody has to bring an action within 180 days, and then the court balances a bunch of factors. I've got those here, and I think you have them in your packet, to determine whether or not the court's actually going to void the decision. But the goal isn't to win the case after it goes through the court. The goal is to stay on the high road so that you avoid the risk of being sued or called out on the carpet for an open meetings violation. So that's kind of the serial meeting thing.
My question is, when you state that 2 people meet together and then they tell someone else that's on the board, if 3 people are meeting and we're not making a decision at this meeting, we're just discussing because some people may have questions about the way process is going or whatever the case may be, and you're not getting a decision from anyone, 3 people can meet.
Exactly right. You're a board of 7. So because you're a board of 7, the way the statute applies to you is more than 3.
Right.
So it's more than 3 or a majority, and that's where a 5-person board comes in with 3. So let me just say this. It's more than 3. So a meeting, if 3 people sit down and talk, that's okay. Mm-hmm. The thing that you have to be super careful about, though, is whether there's an intent either by that group of 3 or any one of those members to now carry that message to the next step.
That was my next question.
So that's the issue. What happens in Open Meeting Act violation claims is, when we're talking about serial meetings, is intent. So remember when I was here and I said I can create a violation of the Open Meetings Act by talking to one board member, another board member with the intent of reaching a decision or an intent to cut short deliberations later on. That's the key word, is intent. There's absolutely nothing wrong with me talking to Allison as a school board member, and then later in the day being at the grocery store, and I bump into Tim and I talk to Tim about school district stuff, but I don't have intent.
Right.
So then the question is, how do we prove intent? And the way we prove intent is through, for instance, then you show up. I don't have a specific example. You show up and there's a motion to close the school, and there's 2 minutes of discussion, and you vote. That's kind of that would cause somebody who didn't want that school closed to go, that was awfully quick, and then they start doing requests, and then you get into Open Meetings Act violation litigation. That actually was a case from like 1985 in Anchorage, called the Tunley case.
Mr. Dorn was first, and then Ms. Anderson.
Talking about the emails, one example I think about is sometimes we read an article that we think might be of interest to the board, and I know over time I've appreciated getting an article that somebody came across and it was like, oh yeah, and we do send it through Sharon out to the board. But in terms of how does open meetings, how does that play in open meetings? You know,
Okay.
Because there may be, hopefully they're factual articles, but they may offer differences of perspective and stuff that might enter into our conversations later on. But
Oh, yeah. No, the forwarding of, that would be, that's passing on whether it's a newspaper article about, something that happened somewhere else that involved a school board, or any other aspect of education, or some journal, any of that is fine. I mean, that's sharing information, and I could do that, because you know what, that's not deliberating. It's not saying, how do we apply this idea or ideas to our school district? It's not voting, so it's always about deliberations and voting. Deliberations and voting. And then the goal, I will say, I think one of the deliberations and voting, and not being, and staying high enough on the road that you're not being challenged. Because the cost of challenge, you can win the case. What does it mean to win a lawsuit nowadays? You still spend a ton of money, right?
So could I just follow up a second? And let's say I read the article and I thought, gee, I hadn't thought about that, or I'm glad to hear, get this perspective, whatever. If we respond to that, we would need to be, again, not a reply all, but be careful that we're not entering into deliberation piece. We might acknowledge it more than deliberate.
Well, remember, there's always the first mover advantage, which is the potential energy. So the first mover always gets to be able to say, and I think this and this and this and this and this and this. You're just creating risk for the other board members, which is the kinetic energy part where somebody responds. And but the sharing of the transmission of ideas for the sake of edification of the group or the individual, where you're not deliberating particular matters related to the business of the Fairbanks School District and you're not voting, is fine. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Always make sure I answer questions because I'm good at not doing that.
Ms. Anderson.
That kind of.
So this kind of feels like, are we being put on notice with you being here today? Or is this for information purposes?
I'm only here for information purposes. I am not aware of any claims against the school district.
So I'm a new member, just like Aaron, and I'm going to be asking lots of questions. That's the only way I'm going to learn this thing.
Oh, yeah.
So, Aaron works, and Allison works, and you work. You work. So right now, whatever. I'm the odd man out except for Mr. Doran, so I got to meet with somebody to ask these questions.
Oh, yeah.
I'm full of questions.
Good.
So I was just like, this. I don't like answering emails. I've gotten lots of emails, and I read them, and I look them over, and then I just put them over here. So I'm not answering. When I see them, you already got something on it. Sharon's already got something on it. It's not requiring you to say anything about anything, and I'm not going to. But, that's how I'm going to learn, is by meeting with people and asking them questions so that I can get not so much directions, but there's a lot of history. I mean, and I know some of the history because I've been before the board in other capacities, but how I'm supposed to function and be a responsible board member, that's what's driving me. There's no I in it, but there's a team, and I have to learn how to work with all of these people here as team people for us to move the vision forward. That's my goal. That's what I'm here for to do.
Well, and here, I think what would be helpful here would be a little history on the Open Meetings Act. Is the Act, what's interesting about it is probably about 25, 27 years ago, a judge in Valdez held, so the act got amended after this decision. But back 25, 27 years ago, there was a judge in Valdez who ruled that one board member talking to another board member about school business was a violation of the Open Meetings Act. In other words, that judge was saying, based on that judge's reading of the statute, that you couldn't go get your history. You couldn't learn from meeting with other people. And when that decision came down, the legislature came back and revised the Open Meetings Act to say more than 3, which specifically allows 2 board members to talk to each other about any item whatsoever, with the key being, I can't overemphasize this, the key being that when you go from trying to learn how to be a better board member, getting to know somebody, getting up to speed on somebody else's views, when you go from that to trying to flank the Open Meetings Act and accomplish outside of this room what ought to be accomplished in the room, which is the deliberation and voting, that's when you get into trouble.
Let me also add to what she just stated. When there are emails being sent, and this has nothing to do with the Open Meetings Act, I wanted to save it, but I might forget it. Whenever there's an email sent to the superintendent and to Sharon Tuttle, I think it needs to be CC'd to me also, as board president, in order for me to know what's going on. Because there's been times when someone has come up to me and said, why didn't you tell me about so-and-so? I didn't know about it because I didn't get the email. So, and I think that should be vice versa too. It just depends on, I guess, what it is that you're talking about with the superintendent.
And that would not be, there would be nothing wrong, that's not an Open Meetings Act issue. Right. That would be a preference issue and working out, how you want to be kept informed about, district happenings or not.
Okay.
So if somebody sent an email, so a board member sends an email to Karen, that email being transmitted to you is neither voting nor deliberations unless other facts happen, which we don't have to address here. Right?
And most likely, Karen will be the one to respond because she has all the information here at the district. But it's not, I guess it's not noted anywhere that she needs to keep me connected. And I'm just saying, in order for me to function as board president, I need to know what's been said, because I could turn around and go right to Karen and ask her for the same information. So.
And I think that's like part of the norms conversation. Is,
yeah,
just having that, like what procedures do we want for everybody to have? So
okay. Any other open meetings?
Any other questions
for Open Meetings Act?
Okay, we just wanted John here just in case people had questions and felt like they needed any gaps filled. And
let me just.
But I'm here for other reasons too.
He just right, Sean.
Negotiations.
Did you have any questions concerning the Open Meetings Act?
No, we thought we're pretty good at the FNSBSD.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so we going to board norms now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm going to start out, Sean, let me give you this packet also. I gave it to everybody else. Can you pass that down to him? Mm-hmm. And I'll preface this by saying, a lot of people think because I've been on the board for 13 years, I know all the ins and outs and procedures and things of that nature. People tend to have that impression. So I just want to premise this by, I can't have information if it's not given to me. And the reason why I'm stating that is because one of the papers that I put in here for you guys, I guess I'll put them all in here so that I have it too. This is a packet that we got from 2006. And it's this packet that says appendix on the front of it. And the reason why I'm giving this to you all is because it's something that we used to get on a regular. And maybe I haven't given that information or told Karen what information I think we need. But I think with new board members on the board, most of us, besides the 2 new board members, have probably seen what's in this packet before. We normally get a report from the administration at least once a year concerning the assessment. And we normally get a report proficiency by grade level, and then we have a report. I think we've already gotten a report for the daily count. I think you gave that to us already for this year. I just grabbed this packet because I was cleaning out a lot of stuff this weekend, and I thought it was a really good packet. And, of course, the school year calendar, we always get that. And elementary school progress. I don't know if we've gotten that here yet. And I separated out the facilities report. And the reason why I did that was because we haven't seen a facilities report in a while that I know of. We got one, it was the state one that I've gotten, but I think this information is very vital to all board members. This one is from 2009, and the reason why I think this is very good because you can take the last one that I remember we got was 2017. You can take and make a comparison because of what we're going through right now with the borough. You can see that we've worked on a lot of these things, and a lot of these things have dropped off. It's not like we're just sitting around doing nothing about our facilities issues that we have. And we are working in unison with them. And I just want people to know that a lot of things that you're hearing may not be vitally true, because I know at the last meeting with the borough, I heard them say that we didn't have a list that we were working on, and we do. This list used to come out every year. We may have had one this year, Karen, but I can't remember ever getting one. Did we get one this year yet?
Right. So I think did we have Dave do it in person in the spring? We've had him do it like in person once a year, and then we've been sending them out electronically. So, but I think we had him do, well, because he actually had to do one in the spring to get it approved to then submit the application.
Spring of 2018?
This past spring, yeah.
Okay, if you could send that to us again, because the new members didn't get one.
Right, so they wouldn't have seen that.
Okay.
I can send that out again, yeah. Oh, sorry.
Plus, we had some on the discussion when we had the borough.
I think we had a copy of it again.
Yeah, I think they had a copy of it when we did.
I think we got the state one then with the borough discussion, because it showed.
No, with the, when we were doing the when we were authorizing projects for the bonds at that point in time.
Okay. Yep. I don't remember getting one, but if you could send that out again, I appreciate it. The other one that I put in here was a welcome packet. This is a packet that was given to the board members, and this is 2014-15. Like I said, it's old stuff that I have, and I know we have new stuff out. I just was curious if the district is giving out this information to new personnel that come on board. You all may have a different setup or a different packet, but this is another one that's a lot of good information for new people to know that we're giving this information out so people know where to go for what information they may need for whatever time frame. A lot of this stuff in here is old. The compacts, I don't think we're doing those anymore. Are we, Karen?
We do actually have those.
We still do those? Okay. I think you may have updated them, but like I said, this is 2014-15. So this is information I think would be good for new members, that you all can see what's all here in this district.
And Sharon, was this a Sharon packet, a welcome packet to board members?
No, I think it was,
just for new
I think this was HR.
So a lot of this is online.
So you're saying that they don't give new employees any type of a packet anymore?
I would have to find out from them what there's a ton of paperwork new employees get. Oh, Claire's here. She doesn't know what we're looking at, but yeah.
Well, she didn't see it. You got one?
Wendy?
Hold on.
So during new employee orientation, we have a packet for each employee group, teachers, support staff, et cetera, and there is information about the board. It's not extensive, and it probably doesn't go to, I'd have to review this to see what all is in here, but there's definitely slides that talk about the board and the board policies, where to find those, and how to contact the board. So we have some stuff, but we could certainly look at it and see if we need to buffer that information.
This is not information for the board. This
right,
is information
for new hires. Right, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, so we do talk to new hires about the role of the board and, where to find board policies and who the president is, et cetera. So we do have a few slides that we share with new hires about the board.
Well, I'm just saying you probably don't have to give it to them in paper, but this is good information for any new employee. Ms. Morati.
You were talking about new board members getting information like this. We do get this on our first day, and then some. It's a welcome packet about that thick.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So she's giving you more information now.
Yeah. And,
I don't think I've
and
seen this.
yeah, almost all of this, the stuff that's in here is,
Good. Glad to know that, because I didn't know that. And then, any other questions? Ms. Anderson?
So, piggybacking on what you're saying, and I don't know where this goes, so let me just put it out here. The packet, a new board packet might need to be done for school board members. That doesn't say that you're a new hire, but that you're a school board member. And then there was one form that we filled out during the orientation. It didn't have school board on it, so I was like, I'm not going to fill this out because of what I've ran into, so could I have something that says school board member? And you know, when you go on the website, you have to go through employee. You can't just go to your school board and then go into your email. So all of that, because of what I've ran into with my situation, I think we need to make a packet strictly just for school board members. Doesn't say they're new hires, they're school board members, and then articulate what all that is. When we went through the orientation, it was like we're going through a new member being hired for the district, and that's my angst with my situation.
You know, you talked about your orientation with Sharon.
No, Sharon's was fine. It was when we were in HR.
Okay.
So, yeah, it needs to be a separate, whole separate packet.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Moyer?
I think she's referencing the paperwork that we got, and we watched a video. It was on bloodborne pathogens and whatnot, and then there was a packet of paperwork for like contact information, health insurance, and that kind of stuff.
So all those things are needed by new board members. We have to do all that.
Mm-hmm.
So you just wanted to say board member, not new hire.
No hire, yes, ma'am.
Maybe just add a line.
You got it clear, Scott. Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha.
And I'm just going to caveat and say that I think it's the legislature that has to do this, so they need a definition for employee. And I think that would clear up a lot of situations that may be coming forward in the future, because the IRS returned a 12-page opinion is based off of what the legislature said an employee is. And a board member is not an employee. I don't care what definition or how you want to state it or whatever the case may be. We're not employees because you don't hire us, you don't fire us.
And I think John can address this too.
Yeah, and I represent the district, not directly, but I did contact Kathy Lee over at Division of Retirement and Benefits, that's DRB. And where this all stems from is from the bona fide regulations, the bona fide separation regulations that were implemented in January of 2000, might have been 17, it was January 2017 or 18, I can get that. But what happened, just to give a really brief history, what happened is that for 20 or 30 or 35 years, our state Division of Retirement and Benefits was not complying with the IRS rules on bona fide separation. And so what they were saying is once you resigned, you could go back to work for the same employer in a non-employment situation, and then with certain time restrictions go back even in an employment way. And what they were saying is that separation was separation from the PERS or TERS, not separation from the employer. That was identified in an audit that occurred, that mistake was identified in an audit that occurred about 3 years ago. And the IRS, because that could have disqualified the entire state retirement system, meaning all of that money would no longer be non-taxable prior to the time of dispersal, it would all have become taxable. It would be a huge, huge state problem. And so what they did is went into a voluntary compliance with the IRS, and part of that voluntary compliance was the adoption of these bona fide regulations, which came out for the judicial system, which is a small part of the retirement system, the PERS and the TERS. And the bona fide separation requires that where somebody leaves employment, that they not come back into an employment situation, depending on their age, either 60 days or 6 months if you're over 62. So that brings up this situation, which is odd, because if you get any benefits, what the IRS, this is according to Kathy Lee, so the particular situation with Fairbanks came up to the attention of the Division of Retirement and Benefits. They sent that out to tax counsel, outside tax counsel, they're the ones who gave the 12-page legal opinion, which DRB would not give to me. So, we didn't litigate or anything, but I said, I'd like it. And they go, we're not giving it out. It's our attorney-client. I think there's arguments that could be made, but my representation is of the school district. I just can't go running out filing lawsuits without direction. But what they concluded, what the legal opinion from outside counsel concluded, was that the proper way to track any benefits that is received by a publicly elected board member is through a W-2, and that makes the person an employee for purposes of the IRS bona fide separation regs, therefore concluding that it would be what's called a sham retirement if you retired and then came back into the quote-unquote employment, even though being publicly elected does not have the indicia of employment. So there's an IRS 7-part test that's really a 21-part test or thereabouts that analyzes, are you under the control and direction of a supervisor? Do you bring your own implements to work? Those don't apply to a publicly elected person, but this legal opinion concluded that was how the IRS would rule. And so the state is very nervous right now. Remember, they were out of compliance for 30-some years or 20-some years. They're now in a voluntary compliance so that they don't have the entire retirement system declared not eligible for tax benefit, tax treatment. And so they've concluded that a publicly elected person who receives a W-2 is employment and therefore subject to the bona fide separation regs.
Ms. Moore.
So to clarify, if a board member did not receive benefits, then would the IRS determine them not an employee because they wouldn't get a W-2?
I'm not going to. So this is not a decision that the
catch-22?
No, but here's the decision that. So what do I think versus what do they think, and that's important because this is not a decision that the district can make. This decision is being made. This decision almost by the notes I have from my conversation with Kathy Lee, who will probably not be happy that I'm talking on recorder about this, and I'll probably never get any information from her again. But is basically it's being made by tax counsel, outside tax counsel, meaning outside tax counsel, and that they have concluded that the state, I don't know what their legal opinion said. Most of them say this is right within the regs, or this would be more risky, this would be less risky. Generally, there's options. I don't know if there were in this case. But yeah, they decided that it would be covered. So a response would be that, for instance, a bylaw change that would make it voluntary, and then somebody declares that they don't want it, they don't get a W-2, and therefore do they qualify, there's a prohibition. So number one, before doing that, what I would ask is DRB, Division of Retirement and Benefits, if we do this, what happens next? That would be one approach, to say if we do it, does it comply? Here's the potential catch-22, is part of the bona fide separation regs is no prearrangement. So if there's a prearrangement, meaning I agree to waive any benefits for the next 6 months, and then I'll get benefits. If that is termed a prearrangement by DRB or outside tax counsel or the IRS, then DRB, Division of Retirement and Benefits, has to report that under the regs, has to report that to the IRS as a sham retirement, which is not the column you want your name in at the IRS, generally. So, does that answer your question? Did I answer your question? So,
No.
Well, okay.
But
No, but pin me down. No, but I think this is, if you're looking for a workaround, what I would do is say, if we do this, is that going to be an acceptable workaround? And I think, and I'm just telling you that a conservative entity trying to keep their IRS eligibility for their tax plan is going to be conservative in their response. And I worry that they might raise the no prearrangement. And so then somebody would have to declare, I permanently never want benefits as an elected representative?
Well, what I wanted to do was
That's a good point.
just stick that
So
in there. It's
willing.
not a part of our board norms, so I kind of going to have to cut it off right here so we can continue on with the board norms. But I think Toya, I don't know if Kathy Lee would talk with her, but I think Toya needs to talk with Kathy Lee and bring up some of the things that you brought up so that she can resolve the issue, because I think there's a way around her being able to receive it. One question I did want to ask, though, I remember somebody on the board stating that they wanted to give up their stipend, and they were told they couldn't. Is that true?
3 times.
Is that true?
Yep, I asked 3 times.
Okay. We're going to leave that alone then. Okay,
But-
we'll move on. Okay.
All we need to do is do a policy change. Sorry, we just need to do a policy change.
For whomever wants to not get it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Like a voluntary. If you don't want it, then you just opt out of it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think you could opt out of that either.
I know.
You can opt out of
It's a
that?
bad situation.
Okay. All right, well, we'll move on with the board norms that Karen might have to give us. Did you have anything on board norms?
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mr. Dorn?
I'm just wondering, is that a suggestion not to go on to discussion, but we might want to come back to at some point to change, relook at the policy of,
I mean, I'm more than willing to do a policy. All we have to do is direct Dr. Gabor to bring us a policy, and we'd have to vote on it, right? Is that correct?
Yes. Now, again, that would take care of the stipend issue. I don't, getting to John's point, I don't know if it'll take care of Ms. Sanderson's issue, but we could certainly take care of the stipend issue. So, and folks can already opt out of health insurance, so that's already there. So, yeah.
It's like a 1-sentence change.
okay. So just not, I know it's not part of our norms tonight, but just the notation that we want to come
Well,
back
I can
to.
have
So we could follow up on that.
We would like to have a policy brought forward so that we can vote on whomever wants to opt out of the stipend.
Okay.
And I guess I had one more thing, and I guess this is the place to do it as well. Right now, we have our committees that are under administration, and I want a policy brought back so that we can put it back under the board. Because I feel those committees should have never left. I did vote for it to be changed the way it was. That was a year ago. And I don't see a clear difference. I really don't. It should stay under the board, especially the budget and the legislative. Because the budget is the board's, one of the main functions is the budget. And of course, we go and we legislate for different things that we need for our district. But I think it needs to come back to the board. You can keep your committees the way that they're set up, but I think it needs to come under the board jurisdiction. I don't know if we have to vote on that again, or it's up to the board. Yes, Chair. I'm sorry, Ms. McConnell.
My only concern or comment about that is because of if they were board committees, then they would have to have a quorum, and that was a big problem. Am I correct?
There were numerous issues, but quorums
But that
were
was
one,
one
and
of
we
them,
kept
right?
having to cancel meetings
Yeah.
because we couldn't get quorums. We had significant turnover when people were appointed by board members as opposed to wanting to be, and then and if we keep the makeup of the committees the same, this might address this. We also didn't. I really felt like we needed broader stakeholder engagement in those committees. So, ESSA staff represented support staff, and the previous policy was each board member appointed somebody. It could be anybody, right? Could be anybody, and so sometimes you ended up with no staff at all. And so I wanted staff representation on those committees. So that. So especially on budget, so that they could have feedback there. I put all of the association presidents on legislative. In the past, that wasn't the case. Sometimes it was just a committee of the whole with the board. That changed, so if the board wants changes, maybe we can look at that. And I'll go back and I can outline, numerous changes, numerous issues with that. And I can just let the board know what those concerns were, so you can see them when you're deliberating.
this, the way you have it set up right now, you still have to have a quorum, right?
No,
No.
there's no quorum required.
But I still think it needs to be under the auspices of the board.
So I think if it's a board, we can check on that, but I think it's a board committee, we have to have a quorum to meet. So I think that's.
But you're keeping it the same way it is.
Oh, and again, the makeup might be the same. Maybe the board appoints people rather than the associations appointing their own reps. Maybe the board
No, I'm
appoints.
saying to keep it the way it is. I don't see where there's a problem with that. It just
That
needs
could
to be under,
but you still have to have a quorum to meet, I think. But we have, well, I don't know, we have so many members. I guess it'd just be a matter of how many members would be required to run business. So, so let's use budget as an example. Where's Andy? How many people are on budget committee right now? Is it 9? Is that?
Yeah, there's currently about 8 or 9 participating, but then there's 6 or 7 empty seats.
So we have
So
empty
it's like
seats.
15
So
total.
yeah, so again, you're right on the edge on quorum there, but we can certainly go back to that.
Mr. Dorn.
I think when the board, I was sitting out in the audience at the time the board made this decision. If I'm correct, it's board/administrative committees.
No, I just administrative.
Just administrative. Okay.
It's administrative.
And there might be a middle ground. I like the broad participation. I like the fact that they're not dependent on board members signing, so that you get actually a broader perspective than might be on the board. So I like a lot of the construct of things. I think the one thing that seems problematic in my experience has been, as a board member, seems to have little input to, if I had an item that I'd like to have discussed, it's hard to get on the agenda. And it's more seen as an administration coming from that. And I think it's just a small piece that could be addressed, so that the board member on, I'm fine with being a non-voting, because eventually we get to vote on anything that's there, so it's not an issue. But I think in a sense it's a co-facilitator. I love the idea that there's someone from administration who's facilitating the meeting and putting all of that together. That's great in terms of our other duties. But that the board members have a more proactive role in looking at what might be agenda considerations and stuff. So that there might be issues from the board side that we want to make sure we get some feedback from people on, and I have not seen that necessarily in play.
Ms. Mariah?
So I haven't been around when they were board previously, so what was the difference? Like, what would be the point of putting them back under the board?
Because it's a board responsibility, the budget and all the other committees, and I'm really happy with just the legislative and the budget coming under the board again. And I really think it's our policy to set if there needs to be a quorum or not. Because when you have a quorum for something, it doesn't necessarily have to be a quorum, because when they bring it back from the committee, the board can change whichever way they want. So if you have to have a quorum, that means the quorum is the one that's going to set what goes forward. The way you have it right now, it's not set as a quorum, and what goes forward, the board is still the final determination on it.
And that's always been the case with every committee. You know, it's a recommendation to the board, so then
Right,
the board does whatever they.
So if it's a recommendation, it doesn't have to be a quorum. We
It's a
set
board
that
committee,
policy.
so if you want, well, I guess we have to decide what it is, what outcomes we're looking for, and I'm hearing different things. If we want it to be a board committee and we use that language, my understanding is that there has to be a quorum present, so, but we can
And I
do.
was told you don't have to have a quorum.
Well, we have a lawyer.
Yes, because it's our committee.
I'd have
We
to
have to
look
look
at
at the bylaws.
I'd have to look at your bylaws. I've not looked at this at all. I'm more than happy to look at it, but I've just not looked at them at all.
Well, yes, Ms. Lambert.
You could always do like a hybrid if we wanted to talk about it again, where a couple of committees, because they're more board related would be, like you said, the legislative committee or the budget committee could be more of a board committee and change that, but keep the other committees in the administration aspect of it so that they can run, because I know that quorum is a big issue, but like curriculum, you don't, doesn't necessarily have to be a board, but you don't necessarily need a quorum in there, and you can still have that discussion without it, and policy would be the same type of thing. So we could do a hybrid, something, talk about it.
The only other thing is with our committees, we've always had administration leading the committees because they have all the information, and they've always given us the information, and we would deliberate on it. So that's not a change. Administration has always led them. We've always had board members there, and the board members have always appointed people to those committees. But I don't think a quorum is required if you have a policy that says you don't have to have a quorum. Ms. Moratti.
So if the structure of the committees are staying the same and the admin is still facilitating it, by bringing it under the board again, what would be the changes, or is it just in writing?
It's the responsibility of the board, is the way I see it, bringing it back under the board.
But what does that mean?
That means that the committee can meet as it is stated already, and that the board is responsible for that committee, whereas administration is always going to be there, a part of that committee. They've always given us the information because we don't have it as a board.
And I guess I would just say, just my experience, this policy change in the ARs actually matched practice, right? And so to Ms. Moratti's point, whoever the board, whoever the staff member staffing that committee, so like the chief operating officer, took care of the agenda and all that. You know what I mean? They take care of everything. Ms. Lambert and I served on the budget committee quite a while. Ms. Lambert would say, I'm here, run the meeting. You know what I mean? So this actually matched practice, and we didn't keep getting hung up with quorum. And so we didn't have to
that quorum piece up, I can almost guarantee you that we can keep it the way it is. It just needs to be under the board.
So yeah, maybe we can. I'll work on bringing something back for the board to deliberate on.
We're still in norms. Did you have something else? Well, I have something else. It has been suggested to me also that we should limit comments at the board meetings, and I think this is the time to bring something like that up. If people are upset that someone is using too much time making comments or whatever the case may be, I just need suggestions of how you all would like to have it changed. You don't have to give it to me tonight. You can email it to me with no problem from the attorney that you can email to me. Yes, Mr. Joyner.
If we're thinking in terms of limiting board member comments, I'd have real concerns about that. I think that we've worked pretty well, and I know I'm I can be a long speaker at times. But I think it's been good that, making sure that, if I have 12 questions, that I don't go through all 12 and monopolize that, I might, 2 or 3, and then you move to somebody else. So everybody gets in, and some of them are going to be similar and stuff like this, or comments. And I think a commentary of that. My concern about setting a time is that if our responsibility is to deliberate, every member should be able to fully deliberate their piece. If they can repetitive, I think a comment can easily be taken care of from the president, or even another board member who says, Tim, you're getting repetitive, and I think it's been pretty well handled most of it, but I'd be real concerned. So with that, I think I will keep quiet, but I'm very concerned about putting a time on that might limit the deliberation that we have a responsibility to do.
Dr. Gabor.
So I just have I think this last board meeting was a great example. So deliberation is a key. So the deliberation is when the board gets to its business. And I know as Ms. Dominique and I and Ms. Tuttle struggle with the agendas. So the board did not get to their business until after 9:30 at the last meeting. And so I just keep cutting back reports and do more and more electronically, which we need to be doing anyway, right? And so my philosophy has been, and of course I'll adjust as needed, but has been, I'm only going to put reports in front of the board if there's kind of new stuff, right? I mean, here's the results of the CTE. We need to talk about Hutch a little bit so you guys know, or if it's really going to drive a decision. Like we're not just doing a report. We're not doing fluff reports. We're sending all that electronically. So the challenge is what we had 2 reports or 3 reports, and the time on each of those reports was well over an hour. My staff are like, I have a taser, right? If they go over 10 minutes, they're getting zapped. Right, 10-minute report. So that sounds a little bit, right? But everybody is well-versed, 10 minutes. But then the rest of it takes well over an hour, and it's not an item it's just an informational item. It's not board business. And then you get to board business at 9:30, and people are getting super tired. And we had huge decisions to make at this last meeting. And you know what I mean? And so it feels like we got the conversation on the wrong end. So something to consider, because again, I'm trying to tighten it up. I mean, we're talking about no acceptance speeches. We're trying to tighten up everything so that you guys can get to your business at a reasonable hour and spend the time you need on that business. So that might help if you think about it. Ms. McConnell?
So you all know that I don't speak very much, but when I do, I have a point to make. And I think that's the way we should all be. I think we should all come to the meetings prepared, read all the information that's been sent to us. If there needs to be any clarification on any of the materials, I think that needs to be done before the board meetings and just make it run smoother. I mean, at these board meetings like this last one, I tried to stay there, but I've been having some health issues, and I had to sneak out, before I could even vote on anything. So, and that really was a disappointment to me. But I really would urge board members to do their homework if they need clarification or answers, especially if, like Dr. Kaborg said on these reports, get that information before, and that way we don't have to be asking for answers or clarifications, because that does take up a lot of time, and we need to get to the business before us on voting on important issues. So, my 2 cents.
And on the agenda items, if you have agenda items that you would like to see on the agenda, please just email me and send it to Karen, copy me and share it. Because that way, if one of us is not in the loop, at least we got it still going. It's still going on. And I appreciate all the comments that are being made on the different issues that come up, but I just think that there are times when there's excessive time used when it could be used for another report that we could put on the agenda. Ms. Morati and then Mr. Rice.
Just to clarify, do you mean comments and questions or just comments?
What are you talking about now?
For what we're limiting. So as new board members, we may have questions that we don't think of prior. When we do our homework, I read and read and read and read. But I still come to the meetings, especially the regular meetings, and then questions pop up. I can't
you can ask questions and comments. That's not a problem. It's just that it gets extensive when you have someone taking a lot of time on one subject and other people don't have questions on that particular one, but they might have questions on the next one. And then they still have questions and more questions and more questions. It's just that if you can get some of your questions answered prior to, that would be less time for anyone that has questions at the meeting. And I think it's most important that we put the most important questions out there so that the public knows that we're not doing everything behind the door. Mr. Rice.
She asked part of my question, so thanks for asking her first. But, one thing, I know that we cut back on, sending them out, but, I really like downloading all of the information that we do get. One thing I'm not going to say is when new policies or policy language comes up, maybe, just having something written out, kind of, me and John Thies used to be really bad when it came to actually our board packet. a lot of times you'll see us opening it up right before the meeting and then trying to read through it. But, I really like the downloading one because, at lunch and break time I could sit at work and read it. But, I was told back then from Leslie, who stated, kind of mentioned, maybe some of these you need to have written down before you come to the meeting. So, or, ask beforehand, so when you come to the meeting, you have, just your basic topics that you need to hit on. So.
And the other thing is when you have a question beforehand, there's nothing wrong with saying, I asked this question and this was the answer at the meeting. That just takes a couple of minutes. I mean, not even a minute, to say I got the answer to my question, or whatever the case may be. That shortens the time. Any other comments, questions? Do you all have anything else for board norms?
Well, I just wanted to clarify. So my practice has been, so if a board member emails me with a question or anything, to copy my response, to copy the president. And so it sounds like we want to continue that. You're asking that maybe the board member copy you on the question. So that piece is always there. And then if it's information that, sometimes it's information that I think the whole board would be interested in this. And then then I'll copy Sharon and say. And then I'll make a comment to everybody, to the whole board. So, especially if it's about, something that's coming up, I don't even know what that means. Can you send me another copy of the fiscal plan? Or what, where's Barnett ranked on the list? And I can, what I mean? I could say, send that to the board, because probably everybody has that same question. So I'll keep doing that. That made me think of something else, though. I just lost my train of thought. Oh, I think we just also have to be super careful and remember that you guys need to direct me. I mean, I'm the employee that you direct in terms of work, so we have to be super careful about requests to anybody else for information. So again, and it's not that it might be absolutely relevant to something that's coming up, but if you'll let me know, then I need to kind of help balance their workload and, decide, is that something we can do? Can we get that to you? Do I happen to know, you'll get that coming up anyway as part of the process, whatever the process might be, So, you'll get a whole report on Hutch, when it comes up, because that's going to be part of the conversation. So I think we just have to be careful about single board members, can't direct work of employees. The board needs to direct me, and then I can kind of parse it out from there. And so if Claire's in the middle of hiring season in June, I'm going to be like, can we wait? You know what I mean? Like, she is buried. Like, do you need this today, or can I get this to you in September when we come back? Or, that kind of thing. So, yeah.
That brought up another thing for me then.
Okay.
Because we all meet with Andy from time to time concerning the budget things
Absolutely,
that we want.
Yeah.
So I did speak to him, and I think I stated it to you also. I requested that we get all the information concerning all the contracts that we have in the district. I don't know, did I give that to you too?
So he shared that with me. That's a huge ask. That's hours of work. Every single contract the district has. So he and I are kind of working through that right now. And he can't get that to you right now. He just won't be able to.
I told him January. Yeah.
Okay.
I did. I told him in January, but I gave it to him in November. So I know it's a huge ask. But this is information I feel the board members need to know, the money that we're spending on contracts. I think it's a good thing for budget season that's coming up. And I also asked him for, travel for the admin center. Right. And I told him not to give me teachers, not to give me grant travel, but I wanted to know what the travel was for the district. Because for years we've said we're cutting back. So I just wanted to make sure we get the information that I feel we all need to make a good decision about the budget this year.
So again, so the contracted services would be a great, like I would want to follow up more with you, because contracted services are 7% of our budget, right? I mean, what, 700,000? I mean, that's a significant, did I do that math right? Not quite right. Anyway, that's a significant, I mean, we do tons of contract work.
I know we do.
So, so what's the board trying to get at there, the management of how we do contracts? I'm just saying, I'm just throwing it out there, those are the kind of questions I'd want to, what are we trying to figure out? I mean, of all of the contracts that this district has,
and I
what are we
said
trying to get at?
I think I said to him, over 10,000. I'm not looking at the $3,000 and $4,000 contracts that we might have with Joe Blow or whomever, but I think it's important that we know who we're spending this money on.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can get that number of who we have contracts with, I just think it's an ask of the board that's not that big of a deal. Number one, it has to do with dollars, and we're trying to save as much money as we can and put in our schools and just make sure we're not doing duplicate effort or whatever.
Gotcha. And so then I think at some point we're really going to have to talk about and look at, and I understand that the board wants this information, so there's the governance policy role and the management role. And so I think maybe through budget season, if we kind of keep talking about that and having those conversations, so, again, we're talking about utilities contracts, we're talking about business services contracts, we're talking about, I'm not even coming up with, we have tons of contracts. So does the board want to do a deep dive into that, and is that an appropriate deep dive? I think it's a conversation worth having.
It's a conversation worth having. I'm looking at dollars, and I'm trying to get you to make our schools whole, and I think the only way we can get there is that we see where the money is going.
Okay. So hopefully, again, my budget file has, hopefully we can, find a way where you can, again, that's so much more transparent than it ever used to be.
Exactly. Mr. Dorn.
Two things. One, on a procedural thing, if there's an agenda item and we have a question, let's say it's coming out of curriculum, and I have nothing in mind on that, but,
like an update.
The question, is it best the question goes to you and then you send it to curriculum, or do you want us to ask the person who is doing the presentation and would have that information right there?
So, again, in this district, we've tried to have good access. So I've told my folks, copy me on everything. If they get an email from you, copy me. But, again, to your point, we want folks to, to go have those meetings and answer those questions. So I think, we haven't had this strict protocol of, send an email to Karen and see if Tim can ask Mel a question. It's like, send your question to Mel and copy me. Right? And then Mel, if she feels like she's spending hours and hours, she'll come to me and say, can you help me out here? And I'll say, Tim, man, she's like, can we get at this another way? Or
right. It's a bigger question that you think that I think.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful.
Miss Moratti, Miss Anderson, and Miss McConnell.
Okay, so just to clarify, if we need information or have a question for another department or any department, then we don't have to go through you. We can just CC you.
That's worked well. Again, I don't feel like people have abused that. It just copy me, and then they copy me on the response. And then again, sometimes if it's something I think the whole board, this would be great information for the whole board, I'll say, Sharon, could you send this out? So, yeah.
Okay.
And so for me, the request that I had made was because it had to do with discipline, and that was the drug-related incidents from schools. I would like to see some sort of graph or whatever information you guys have, but I'd like to see it by school and by month for whenever you have the information.
So I think we had that graph in the discipline.
It wasn't broken down by month.
It wasn't by month? Okay. So I can ask if Ellis can do that. Yeah.
Ms. McConnell.
So I would just caution the board again, and I've said this past 12 years, your requests take a lot of time from their work. Yes, there are valid concerns, but be mindful of administration and staff's time. Because being in management myself in my day-to-day world, and I serve a board, who are my bosses, and you get all these requests, that's a lot of time. So just be very mindful of that, because they're already overworked, so we just got to be mindful of that.
And I just wanted to comment to Choya. We used to get that in our packets, each board meeting, not by school, but we used to get it in our board meetings, how many incidents were done, either for firearms and whatever else. We don't get that anymore in our package, right? We get it back in the Pardon me? We get it back in but it doesn't give you by school. I'm sorry, Ms. Anderson.
And I think we're headed with our discipline policy and with dress code, some other things. We are facing it's here, but I just think it's going to escalate drug abuse, the mental illness issues that our schools are dealing with. And in order, I mean, when you hear some of the discipline things that's coming before us, I think those things are going to escalate even deeper. It's the nature of where we are right now with what's coming to students, what's coming to families, and in order to make, really informed decisions, some things, I wouldn't ask it, because I'm already overwhelmed with all the information I am getting and I'm reading. And, if I don't open my email, I miss something or I feel like, oh, my God. So it's a huge, I do respect the admin and the people in positions because it's huge. This whole district and the 14,000 students that we're serving somewhere in there and all the staff, this is huge. But I just feel that there are some issues that are coming our way that we have to start to look to the future and try to have a perspective as to how we're going to meet those needs, because they're not gonna be lessened. They're gonna amplify.
And Ellis, when he that discipline dashboard, he was trying to make all of that information available, like it's available to the public, right? So so that might be. I'll see if it's a quick filter thing that he can do that can do it easily. So yeah, and then maybe we just include the link when we send it to you guys so that it's.
Mr. Dorn, do you have your hand up? And I think Mr. McConnell, you had something else you wanted to say? No. Okay, Mr. Dorn.
I think this conversation about the norms is a really important one, and I think it's also those opportunities to build our rapport, and that we can say to Tim, you're talking too much, or or what's. I'm surprised you didn't have any questions about that or something, because some of us are quiet or some of us talk more and those things. But I also, within that balance, because I think the fact that we can talk about this is really important. In the balance, though, questions, and I think I've gotten better. I don't know whether it's shown, but in asking some questions ahead of time, and from when I first came on a year ago, and getting better on getting those things. Still figuring out the balance of sometimes I think it's a pretty direct question, and boom, we're done, and I'm expecting to go on. But also sometimes what we get in the PowerPoint, which helps, because then I may have a question right here, or somebody may have, but also when the presentation is given, then it raises some questions, or the answer wasn't as clear or as easy a one as it was. So there's the follow-up questions that, and again, all this reminds me to try to balance. But we want to be careful that any one of the members has that opportunity to ask those questions, because if it's not clear to one of us, then it may not be clear to the public or those who are impacted by it, and that's part of our job to do that. So, but I think it says a lot that we can have this conversation, and in good ways, and sometimes like, yeah, Tim. And I love the expressions when I had no comments on.
And the agenda setting meetings that we have, Sharon will keep track of them. I meet with Karen every other Friday, so if anybody would like to attend, make sure you talk to Sharon before you decide you want to come and join the meeting, because she will not allow us to have any more than two, me and one other. Sometimes I can't make it. Tim will go in my place sometimes, but if you want to come to an agenda setting meeting, you're more than welcome to. Just be sure you let her know.
Are both you and Tim there each time?
No. Me and Tim have only been there, I think, once. If we've been there once.
I think it's just been you at agenda setting.
Yeah. So, Ms. Anderson.
So, on the past board meeting, the presentation on the two, were they procedures? New policies, the two new policies, those were quite confusing.
Yeah.
And I would really like some background about that.
Yeah, so I need to own that whole thing. That was my mistake. I had my head in the ordinance or in the substitute, and And just so you know, I talked with Ms. Dominique about bringing up the legal counsel, it was Clint, to support Ivory in that. There was a ton of work done with FEA and ESSA and Labor Relations and Ivory and Sean Kraska around trying to put this together. And I think Sandy Ryan will be sending an email and saying, we really need this policy. So a ton of work. Clint provided, and over time this issue came up. Clint provided legal support for that, but also trying to allow the language of the district to be what it needed to do. So my mistake in all of that is I had anticipated, I felt like I needed to carry that water on that policy, and I didn't realize that, so Sean and Clint were fully prepared to give a presentation, and I jumped over the top of them, and I should have just said, before any questions, let them give their presentation, because all of the questions you guys had would have been answered on the front end, so I totally own that. They did hear the feedback, and we'll get at that, and then it'll be back for second reading on the 15th. Clint is still helping. I don't think we need him in the room this time. Again, we're cognizant of not having folks, but on the front end of these things that have huge liability implications and huge concerns for employees, if we're going to talk about discipline or, you know what I mean. I want that legal support there, but I think Sean and Clint, and then Ivory got the notes, know what the input is, and actually I think we're going to get back together with Sandy Ryan, and maybe, I don't know, that Jasmine's been completely involved. Yeah, it's been kind of a group effort, which makes it a little messy too, right? So, again, if Clint had just written that like he would have written that, I think, it's a group process, and he respected that. So that's one thing. I always want to make sure with those policies, especially those, my protocol most of the time is, if there's a policy like that, what I'm going to present to you is what the legal, what the legal advice is. Now, if it's something around homework, then it's going to be what the curriculum department, is recommending. That's not like a legal policy, but anyway, so we will come back with that. And the fact that went sideways was my fault, and like 2 minutes into it, I knew that was happening, and then Sean tried to save me, and then we were on the wrong track. So that's my fault. So I apologize for that.
What is the history for needing this policy? And you say Sandy Ryan is involved in it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I don't know. That's probably appropriate.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? But we will bring all that. And again, that's all that you would have gotten if Karen would have just said, "I'll let my people present this," and she did not do that. So, yeah.
Anything else, Ms. Lambert?
So I just want to make sure that we all understand our rules. We're policymakers, we're not management. So we need to keep at that higher level, and we need to not micromanage. So I know there's a lot of things that people need to know in order to make those, but we have to make sure that we're not crossing that line into actually managing our district.
Mr. Dorn?
I think this fits in norms. We had a board decision regarding changing meeting time. Just update on that, where we anticipate that happening, or when, or...
Yeah, we've been telling people January based on the conversation in the moment that it would start in January. So that's but Sharon's been getting a lot of calls asking when, and so she's just been saying January 15th, right? The first, yeah.
Yes, it started 6. Yeah, and then at 9, we'd have to extend if we go past 9. You might have to. I would never. I wanted to say a very positive thing is I really like getting the draft of the agendas, because that does really help that thinking time ahead of time for, without just a couple, 3 days.
We don't have much in the drafts, though, until we make it final.
At least you know the topics, right? You kind of know what we're thinking.
All of them are not there, though.
And then we're shifting. Sometimes we shift, Dominique and I'll shift, or Sharon says, "Oh, we got to get this first," or we'll.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, but at least it gives you a little bit of. It's I don't know. I find it helpful, and I just wanted to say that I really appreciate since we started doing that. It's helpful to me.
Okay. Now, when did we send out the drafts, though?
Are you doing it like almost 2 weeks ahead of time, right?
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay.
Should be pretty well timed with your meetings and my meetings as we kind of look ahead, right? 2 or 3 down the road. So yeah.
right, going in again. Anything else for norms?
And I would just say, if you guys need anything with regard to communication, again, one thing that was important, I felt like letting the board know kind of what it is I do all day, right? What do you do? So anyway, sending my updates and things and all of the places am engaged. But I mean, if there's something else that would be helpful for me, and I try to hit it I'm not like Johnny on the spot every week, but regularly. So, or if you have questions about what's going on with dual credit, because like that's something. I mean, call me and I'd be happy to let you. The feedback I got was bullet points, not like, great. Bullet points, Karen. If we want to know more, we'll ask you. So, but if you need something different, let me know. So.
Where you putting your hand up?
I'm just so confused about your statement. I don't understand what you meant by it. You said we shouldn't micromanage. I don't know what you're talking about.
A policy.
I just don't want us to start running the district. That's not our job. Management's job is to run the district, and our job is to create the policies where they have the flexibility to run the district, and sometimes we don't.
So you're saying the questions that were asked about the policy should have been asked? You felt like that was micromanaging?
No, I'm talking about when we're trying to dictate things down, or we're trying to get into the weeds too much. That's really not our place to be in the weeds and telling them what to do.
Mr. Dorn?
I think kind of my mental check that sometimes I'm good on and sometimes I'm not, but when sometimes I have a question, I have to rethink whether it's just sort of a nice to know or whether it's something that really is necessary for me to make those decisions on the policy level or on that level, and then also that I don't formulate it in terms of saying, okay, I get the information, but you really should be doing it this way. And I think that gets into the management things. It's just getting information to me, not where I make any decisions regarding that level.
I think the only other thing, I think everybody knows this, but when the board gets emails, that automatically, I copied on that too, and I send that to executive directors, and then whoever else that email really, if it's the principal at Northville High School, right? I send it to them and I communicate with them and say, hey, just, anyway, so just know that administration gets that immediately, and then if it's the type of thing that I can give you an update with that doesn't break a ton of confidentiality, I could do that. Like I think I sent one today that was just trying to let you know processes that were in place. So especially when you start getting a lot of them. So yeah.
Mr. Dorn?
Just to toss out to the other board members, because I'm learning it, I'm starting to now get some individual phone calls, and I know some of you have been on the board longer and you've had, you get these and stuff. Just your advice in terms of I know the parameters pretty much. We don't, if it's administrative, we refer them, et cetera, but the follow-up to those individual calls that we get, and how do you guys handle those, to be able to say, yes, I did pass this on to administration or whatever, or.
Well, try to keep names out of it. Whenever you get a phone call, it's supposed to be sent forward to Sharon, administration, and myself. I'm just CC'd on it. Mm-hmm. Once we get information that we can give out back, you all, as the board, will get a response from me stating the administration has taken the necessary steps to resolve the issue. If you need additional information, contact Karen. If it's personal and like this one we got going right now, we have to wait until the investigation is over. And a lot of times we may or may not get the final information on that because it's a personal issue. Even though it's been brought to the board, we still have to allow the administration to do the investigation and resolve the issue. But Karen did send us information on what steps had been taken on this particular issue because it was pretty out there.
I try to be, again, I recognize that those emails are public, so I try to be super careful with what's in there. So,
right.
Mm-hmm. So do you follow up to the person who called you, or that's what I'm trying to
The board
figure
member
that
should.
balance.
It's nothing
right.
against the board member calling them back and saying that the administration has completed their investigation. If you have additional questions, you can call to, you don't make a commitment, no way, no how, to say, well, this is what I think should happen, and this is what happened, or anything like that. You know, you have to keep it very vague, and if they have more additional information that they want, they need to call Dr. Gabor, in my opinion.
And I'm happy to call too.
Right.
You know what I mean? If it helps to keep you a distance, I'm happy to do the follow-up or.
Okay, Ms. Marati, Ms. Lambert, and then Mr. Rice.
Again, to clarify, so I've gotten multiple calls in the last week, and I'm referring them to the, actually they've all been through to Ms. Kraska. So what, and I don't see a need to follow up. If they make that phone call, then they make that phone call and she takes care of it. So you said to CCU, Sharon and Ms. Gaborik, how, if it's a phone call, what do you want us to do?
State your concerns with the phone call, and if you're forwarding it, that means you're giving it to them to take care of.
It's a phone call. So if I get a phone call, do you want me to email everybody that I got a phone call?
No.
Okay.
The three of us, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
That way, whatever your phone call was concerning, Dr. Gaborik will either put it out to her people to resolve it, and then she will get back to the whole board that this has happened. I mean, if you can generalize what the conversation was about, I'm not saying put every single word in the conversation, but generalize what the conversation was about so we have it on record.
Okay.
No, I think that's great, and I can guess, like, so, again, just because Ms. Marati is connected, you know, if they're getting questions about the Hutch Lottery, right? And so, you know, we can say, you know, Ms. Marati's been getting questions about Hutch Lottery, Ms. Kraska, or actually probably hopefully Ms. Taylor, right, is following up with people and giving them the information they need. So, I mean, I think that would be, yeah.
Because the board member doesn't have to call that person back. You've given it to the administration. They're going to make sure that person gets a call back. But if the person that made the phone call to you didn't get a return phone call, that's when I would call administration and say, you know, this person's saying they haven't heard from you guys, what's going on? And then you all have to get back to that person. Ms. Lambert.
That was my question too, if you wanted to just, we take a phone call, then just summarize it and send it to you. And then just for the emails, what I usually do is just send it to Sharon, and then she sends it to, or she takes it, send it, and then I would send it to you too.
I think you need to send it to Sharon and Karen and CC me, just so I know that someone got an email about that.
Because I usually don't answer them back because I want, that's what you guys do, so that's what I've been doing. Keep doing the same thing.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Rice.
My only other advice is when people call me, I always let them know that I'm not the board president, that I do not speak for the board. I'm only one person on the board, you know, and then I try to, I mean, I've done it with Karen quite a bit. You know, I always try to say, you know, here's a person you need to get a hold of, and here's a person, you know, I either try to send them to Sharon. If it's I think that it might be an easy question, you know, Sean Kraska or, you know, whoever else, you know, if it's just a quick, easy question. But if it's a big issue, I always make sure that I always email Karen and the board president. So now I know to add Sharon to it. So.
Because I can tell you one issue that we had, I'm not using any names or whatever, but the young lady was very close to me. It was like my little granddaughter. She did not involve me at all, and I really thanked her for that because we were really close, and it bothered me. I really wanted to go and say something, but I couldn't. And she kept me out of it, sent it to you guys, and when she got her response, then we could talk. But that one was really touching. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think it's time we go into negotiations. Already.
And we would like to actually keep executive session here if we can, just to use the screen and have a little bit more space. So I mentioned that to Ms. Dominique, so if that's up to you guys, that's fine. You need a motion?
Oh,
Move to convene an executive session with the superintendent, district staff, and council for discussions with the attorney-client privilege on strategies, goals, priorities, and other considerations regarding upcoming negotiations with all 3 district bargaining units. The immediate knowledge of such information would have an adverse effect upon the finances of the district. So no, that's just a motion. No one seconded it.
We need somebody to second. Okay, so I'm right.
Move to come out of executive session.
Second.
Second.
We're out of executive session. If there's nothing else, motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
We are adjourned.